People say to me, Arek, how can there be global warming and yet parts of the world are experiencing extreme winter conditions?
Yeah.
Well, I have to remind them all the time that climate change is about extreme weather. It's extreme weather. In fact, sometimes I think maybe climate change should be changed. The title should change. We shouldn't be referring to climate change. Maybe we should be talking about climate crisis or extreme climate or whatever. We should be changing the label because unfortunately climate change, I mean, people say, well, we've always had climate change. Let's see, I'm going to make myself coffee first.
Yep.
See, the sound is different. It doesn't...
Is there water in there? There was no water? No water.
No.
There you go. See, sometimes it's a simple solution, Arek.
Thank you, Albert. What would I do without you? I wouldn't have coffee. Oh my God, that's what it was. Okay. My name is Arek Sinanian, and I'm an engineer. And I became interested in climate change indirectly because my earlier career was involved with energy management, energy efficiency, etc. I became very interested in the efficiency with which we use resources, including energy, water, materials, etc. And one way or another, my career took me to consulting in environmental management and energy management and resource management. But then about 10 years ago, I, like many other people, decided that climate change was going to be a major global issue. So I put all my attention and my focus on that aspect, specifically on climate change, carbon management, and of course carbon reporting, etc. So I got involved with what the United Nations was doing at the time, particularly in Europe. So I ended up doing quite a bit of work through the UNFCCC, which stands for United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And through that organization, I developed a wonderful network of other practitioners in this area throughout the world, which I still keep in touch with. And I did a lot of projects in all sorts of places: China, India, USA, Europe, Germany. And that gave me a pretty good understanding of what needed to be done and what was being done throughout the world. What I noticed in the last, really the last 7, 8 years, whenever I met someone, it could have been at a conference, could be at a dinner party, could be at the airport, sitting down and saying, hello, my name is Arek Sinanian. John says hello to me and we start talking. We've got a bit of time to kill. This is typical, and it happened so regularly that I was just amazed. So these people that I've only met for a few minutes would almost be jumping to tell me that they thought climate change was absolute garbage, and at the extreme would say to me it's part of a global conspiracy. So, I mean, this happened once, twice, 10, 20, 30 times, and these people appeared to me to be educated, well-traveled, intelligent people. So I wondered, what the hell's going on? Why? I mean, we don't question other scientific facts. We're about to board an airplane, An aeroplane is the prime example where you put your life in the hands of technology, in the hands of science. And people do this, millions of people do this every day of their lives. So why do they trust that part of science, but not this part of science? So what is it about climate change that's making these people just completely in denial of that science? I did some research, and what I found was amazing to me, because I'm not a psychologist, but the psychology of denial was very interesting to me. And it turned out many studies by psychologists, by very, very well qualified psychologists, and of course a lot of papers have been published, correlating climate change denial with other aspects such as political persuasion, or if you like, ideology, age, gender, religion, all sorts of, even their belief in other aspects of social science, etc. I thought this was interesting to share with other people, and I wrote a book. I happen to have a copy here, which I can show you. It's a very simple, small book called A Climate for Denial. I'm sorry for the advertisement. I thought if we knew more about why people are denying this, maybe our communication could change. Maybe the way we speak to the people who are in denial has to change. For example, I'll give you an example. It turns out the last thing these people want is facts. Isn't that interesting?
Yep.
Right? They don't want to know the facts. In fact, it turns out, and again, the studies show this is not me saying it, it turns out the more facts you give them, the more they push back or pull back. And because a thing called cognitive dissonance basically says that if you believe in something, really believe in something, which these people do, giving them facts actually makes this dissonance even stronger. It's like, if I really like chocolate, eating chocolate, now what I will do is look for evidence that proves to me that chocolate is good for me. And if I like red wine, for instance, I will find every article, everything that scientists tell me that red wine is absolutely fantastic for you. Now, on the other hand, if you show me an article that says chocolate, maybe not so good for you, guess what I'm going to do with that? I'm going to take that article and throw it in the garbage bin, because it does not verify my belief system. So this is a key issue. Now you might ask me, so why do I want to address these people who do? Because it's very simple. Because these people in this book, there's a lot of these people who are still in power. They're in power in very powerful countries, including ours, and these people are making these decisions for the rest of the world, for the next generation. And I think it is important to realize this, so that maybe, just maybe, if we knew how to talk to these people differently, for example, by not giving more graphs of the temperatures rising, more graphs of the ice caps melting. It's the last thing they want. So the conversation has to change.
Will be based on established science, but as much as possible, I'll make my discussions accessible.
What I'm trying to address in these podcasts, which I will put that on air for people to listen to, I'm trying to keep it 10, 15 minutes, each addressing a particular aspect of climate change. In this first one, I'm trying to talk about the basics of climate change, which is what we've talked about. so that people have a fairly good idea of what is climate change, what causes climate change, the greenhouse gas effect, the greenhouse gases, and what do they do, and why, how is it that they cause climate change, and what is climate change? What does it mean? A lot of people still don't quite fully understand that. I know it's surprising, but that's because the media hasn't done a good job in explaining it, and I guess people have a very short attention span, and they don't want to spend hours reading about these very, very complex issues. And so what I'm trying to do in these podcasts is to try to simplify it, speak in very simple language, and basically have a conversation, well, a one-way conversation, where I do the talking into this thing here, and hopefully they will listen and get something out of it. What I'm hoping for is people will write to me and ask questions, and I will answer it through these podcasts.
Arek,
yeah.
Do you think climate change every second of every day?
No, actually no. I
Why
try
not?
because I would get very depressed. No, but I have many other interests. Well, a few other interests. I write music. You can see the keyboard here. I do a lot of writing. I'm trying to write a novel right now. Here are my characters. My characters are James Webster, Steve Hancock, Emilio Gomez, he's Spanish, and Paola Rossi, Italian. So these are my characters of my novel.
Is it about climate change?
No, nothing to do with climate change. I switch between climate change issues and writing on that, and then I have my sort of creative side of my life where I do my creative writing and creative music. The problem is when people like me and these very, very learned scientists call it an existential problem, existential issue, it kind of, people say, come on, you're exaggerating. And when they say this could lead to catastrophic impacts on populations, on countries, on people who are much more vulnerable than we are in this country, in USA, in much of Europe. The reality is, in comfortable economically developed countries like ours, we are going to cope. Basically, you know, we're going to find solutions to it. Yes, it's going to be, it turns out, the economists are telling us, it's going to be more expensive, much more expensive, to deal with the impacts and the results of climate change than to actually try to mitigate this problem. Back to the existential issues. Why existential? People say, come on, Arek, you're exaggerating. Come on, we're not going to, the humanity is not in danger because we're going to have more storms and maybe some heat waves. Are you kidding? You must be. I said, no, I'm not kidding. Why? Because intuitively, people think, look, a bit more rain, a bit more heat wave, the ice caps melting, the sea levels rising a little bit by this much, that much? Is it really going to endanger humanity? No, it's not like that. When I say there's a problem here, the biggest problem is intuitively we don't quite understand how that's going to happen. But that's because we live in parts of the world where this is not going to have an existential problem. But I'll give you a very simple example. Well, okay.
I mean, I'll come back to that in a second.
It's a matter of degree. Okay, am I sure about that? Okay, well, I'll come back
to that
I'll start.
I've got like some,
all right, good. Yeah,
ideas about that, but that's
absolutely.
I'm a non-specialist.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No. Very valid questions. All these, there are so many questions.
I know, but
let's take a few really vulnerable parts of the world. Bangladesh is going to be underwater probably within the next century.
When you say Bangladesh is going to go underwater, are you saying the whole of Bangladesh?
No, no.
Or a large
Well,
chunk of it?
again, I'm being vague because the models vary depending on what's going to happen.
Of course.
One of the criticisms of climate change projections is there is a lot of various scenarios. We don't know how technology is going to. We don't know population growth. You know, there's a lot of uncertainty in projecting forward. But we shouldn't be scared of models that predict the future. Look, models predict economic future. Models predict all sorts of things, and we have to rely as best we can on these models. And what climate change models do is they give a worst case scenario and the best case scenario. As it turns out, so far we've been trajectorying towards the worst case scenario. Okay, that's what.
And to me, sorry to interrupt, but we're not in the model situation anymore. I think we're in the real situation. I mean, I just listed, insects disappearing, species disappearing, once in a century or in a millennia event happening every year.
Yeah.
We're talking about floods, droughts, fires, extreme temperatures, ice melting, plastics in the ocean, polluting the ocean, killing as I said, species disappearing, weird, unprecedented events like water spouts, on the coast of the Mediterranean coast.
Yeah,
I think the evidence, we're not talking about a thing on a computer screen anymore. It's here.
If you talk to an insurance company, they will not even question the sort of the events you're talking about, the extreme events that you're talking about. And heat waves will also result in the ecosystem changing. Birds are already, my article also talks about birds migrating ahead of time. And so what's happening is they usually migrate to find food. So if they're migrating, even 1 or 2 degrees makes a big difference. And if they migrate too soon, they get to their point of migration, point of destination, and the food isn't there yet. So the ecosystem, birds that you mentioned, bees. Bees are also unfortunate. Insects, unfortunately, they're also affected by insecticides. So it's not just climate change, but it's a convergence of all these issues that do scare people, like the scientists. Imagine being the scientist looking at this data every day of your working life. Of course, you're going to go to the IPCC and you're going to say, this is serious. This is very serious. The points that scientists have, if they really say this is a really, really serious, almost existential, maybe catastrophic problem we have, which is going to get worse and worse and worse. If they say that, people will blame them for being scaremongering. It's, this is exaggerated. You're trying to get attention by being a bit over dramatic. Okay, that's the problem if you do that. On the other hand, if they understate it, if they say, it's a problem, but we can find a solution for it. So people will then say, well, in that case, let's not do anything. Why should we? The other problem with these forecasts and projections is people will say to me, and these climate scientists will say, so are you saying there's a positive, there's a sort of pessimistic and an optimistic projection? Why should we assume the worst case scenario? Because that's going to be very costly and it's going to affect my life. It's going to affect our economy. We're going to spend billions, maybe trillions of dollars doing something that may not happen. Absolutely true. Yes, that's right. But here's the thing. In what's known as the Precautionary Principle, which basically says this: if the risk of something really, really catastrophic happening is absolutely tiny, but the impact is catastrophic, the precautionary principle basically dictates that you must do something about it. Denial has a number of different it goes from, as you said, from the conspiracist theory at one extreme, all the way, and some people, for instance, the next level is, yes, I think it's climate change is happening, but humans have very little, if nothing, to do with it. The next level is, yes, climate change is happening, maybe humans are contributing to it, but in the whole scheme of things, it's not a huge issue that we should. Then the next level is, yes, humans are doing something. In fact, this is human-made, but am I willing to sacrifice my life and my money and spend more money on renewable, whatever? So there is different, if you like, levels of denial. As far as I'm concerned, even if you, in that last category where you believe climate change is happening and whether you believe humans are contributing to it significantly, even if you're in that club, if I can call it that, but you're not willing to do anything about it, I'm sorry, you're still in denial. You know, it's a bit like, I don't want to have a go at certain people, but for instance, if we have a habit, I won't mention what that habit is because I'm going to upset people in doing that. Let's say you have a habit that could be contributing to your health. It could be anything. It could be lifestyle, it could be diet, it could be some other drugs or whatever. Okay, you know for a fact, scientific fact, that this habit of yours is reducing your life expectancy. In fact, it might endanger your life immediately, but you're still going to do it. Any psychologist will tell you, and I'm not one, you're in denial. You're in denial. If you're not going to do something about it, basically you're not giving it the importance, the urgency that it requires, that it deserves. To me, there are three levels of acting, okay? Okay, we can do things on the individual level. I can turn my lights off, I can drive an energy efficient car, I can buy green power from power providers, I can put solar panels on my house, all sorts of things. I can buy local, many things that we can do at the individual level, and a lot of people are doing this. And I find that a bit ironic because although people are doing it, then the next level, if you like, at the state government or even national government level, there's not as much happening as there is at the individual level. And that to me is a bit strange. And then at the global level, you know, the United Nations level, there's still difficulty, and I can talk about that very easily because the disparity or the discrepancy between the haves and the have-nots in the world, the developed countries and the underdeveloped countries, is so big. It's huge. And that discrepancy is getting in the way of a global set of action. So countries are doing what they believe they should do, and the global agreements, I mean, even the Paris Agreement of a few years ago, it's an agreement to agree to do something. Basically, that's all it is. Even the progressive politicians are having trouble selling this action, selling real, direct, positive, urgent action on climate change through policy. And a lot of them are basically leaving it for the market to work it out. The way I see it is this: throughout, you know, say since the Industrial Revolution, we've gone through huge economic, technological, social change. I mean, just in 200 years, look at what has happened to the world. look at our technologies. Look at, I mean, 200 years ago, if you said to people, we're going to sit in a metallic object and we're going to fly from Sydney to London in 20 hours, people would have put you in jail or in a loony asylum. Okay, but even more recently, let's look at, for instance, our laptops and our computers. Not so long ago, we had typing pools, and people sat there and typed letters, and they used whiteout and all of that, and then suddenly the IC came, integrated circuitry, and the miniaturization of electronics and diodes and transistors and things, and suddenly we had computers. And now look at, and this did not happen with government intervention. No government said, hey, let's have computers in our society. Let's change from our IBM typewriters to our Apple Macintosh or IBM computers. Nobody intervened to encourage this conversion, if you like, or coming from the dark age to the new age. Happened almost seamlessly, and technology kind of. So I guess politically, a lot of people are saying, well, why don't we let markets decide, when fossil fuels become less available, or they are a resource that is depleting slowly, maybe too slowly, the market will determine, the fossil fuels will become more expensive, and people will find different solutions to our energy hunger. Now, that's all very fine, but because of the urgency we talked about a few minutes ago, because of the existential issue, we can't let markets kind of do their own thing in their own time, and for these solutions to organically find themselves, because while it's doing that, the climate is going to become worse and worse and worse. These impacts we're talking about, extreme weather and sea level rise and ice caps melting, etc., are going to become more and more urgent and more severe. Because we've always had floods, we've always had fires, we've always had heat waves, we've always had storms.
Yeah, but it's the frequency.
Okay. So at one point, this is a scientific stroke philosophical question. So at what point of increased frequency of these, or increased severity of these events, at what point do we go, oh my God, oh dear, this is happening, this is real, but not only is it real, as I said earlier about the different clubs, not only is it real, but hey, we must do something about it urgently. So at what point is what we call the tipping point? At what point does the pendulum go, boom, we must do something about it? I don't think we're at that point yet. Obviously not. I mean, if you look at the American politics at the moment, completely ignoring what's happening. In fact, you might say that it's all pro-fossil fuel. Now, why it is that, I don't want to incriminate anybody, but there seems to be some vested interest in fossil fuel because there's...
Can I chip in here?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that was my next point. New Yorker from 2 months ago.
Right.
On climate change.
Yeah.
And I read something that you must have known about.
Yeah. Yes.
It's just that since 1977,
right,
Exxon and other oil companies,
Exxon Valdez,
Exxon, I mean, as in the oil
Exxon,
company,
yes,
poured millions into scientific research on climate change.
Yep.
Their own scientists 40 years ago predicted where we're at now. They basically knew what was going to, if we carried on, and they have like basically themselves scientific proof that what they're doing and that the use of fossil fuel was going to create the situation that we're in now. What did they do? They used that data to their advantage because they knew, like for example, Gulf of Mexico, that the water would rise, so that would impact their platforms, their drilling platforms in the Gulf. So they decided to go and to basically Antarctica up north at the top, to basically drill there, where there wouldn't, the impact of the use of their own fossil fuel wouldn't be as bad, and so they would be able to carry on doing what they and in parallel, which basically ties in with what you're about to say, is that they also started a very aggressive and strong, long-lasting campaign to poo-poo, to deny the scientific community, to say, well, we're not really sure, when all along they knew that it was from their own research.
Wow.
They knew that this was going to happen. They knew that this was going to happen. And again, the question that comes to my mind now is that, when we had this conversation, it's a philosophical, spiritual question, is I don't understand. I mean, it's like that whistleblower for the tobacco industry. He saw his little girl having an asthma attack. She almost died. He thought, I got to do something.
That's the tipping point.
That was the tipping point for him, who knew that that the industry was putting chemicals and which would make people sick and addicted to tobacco. Why isn't that happening in the oil industry either? I mean, these guys, they don't live on planet Mars. They live on the same planet. They're impacted. Their family, their grandparents, their grandchildren are impacted by this. Why?
Yes.
I don't understand why they're not doing anything. I know that they are preparing for the aftermath of or fossil fuel, because they're not stupid. They're businessmen.
Yeah.
But why didn't they? Like 40 years ago, benefits of the doubt, we don't know, maybe our scientists are wrong. But now, 40 years later, with all the actual proof of, the impact of fossil fuel, direct impact, why they're not coming out and saying, look, we knew all along, we made a mistake. I'm dreaming here, but, and really we need to do something right now and stop using fossil fuels.
Yeah, well, okay, look, that raises a lot of philosophical, ethical, moral questions, but, okay, let me try to answer some of those issues. There are many issues in your question, but I too want to have all these questions in my mind, and I still, okay, I can only guess as to what happens. Okay, but let me look at the big picture here. The big picture is energy compared to 200 years ago. I talked about the Industrial Revolution. Energy drives the world, literally. It's like the world is on wheels and it's going in that direction, 100 kilometers an hour, straight into the wall, into the brick wall, yes, maybe. And it takes, energy is a fundamental requirement in the world today. Everything we do has energy. Okay. And it turns out fossil fuels still are a major factor in the supply of this energy that we are so hungry for, which we rely on every day of our lives. Okay. And these people, and let's not talk about one company, but they're all in the same boat. Their whole raison d'etre is providing fossil fuels. Okay, so imagine, I'm imagining this. Imagine you walk into the boardroom of company XYZ, fossil fuel company XYZ, and you walk into the boardroom and they say, gentlemen and ladies, usually one or two, we have a major problem here, moral problem. Me and my team, scientists, have decided that what we're doing is going to possibly destroy, the life, the humanity, eventually. I mean, what would be I can't imagine, I can't imagine the boardroom saying, oh, okay, then, well, let's pack up and go home and stop the production, because they've invested, the investment in all the drilling rigs and the infrastructure, the distilleries, the machinery that takes the explores for fossil fuels in the first place, pumps it out, transports it to facilities that refine it, and then the transport system to all the markets. Can you imagine? It's trillions of dollars of investment. Now, for these companies to suddenly say, oops, we're out of here. But also, let's be realistic. The fossil fuel industry is still going to be a major provider of a lot of the fuel. It's a balancing act, and I guess over time the idea is to ramp down fossil fuel and ramp out more carbon-free energy supply. So we have to supply all this energy that we need, but with significantly less carbon intensity. Okay. So how do we do this? So again, I'm guessing this. I guess these fossil fuel companies in the boardroom say, look, we carry on doing what we're doing. This is what we're here for. Our shareholders expect us, because they're buying our shares. Our owners, the owners of this company expect us to deliver what we are. And when the market decides that we are no longer needed, we'll pack our bags and go fishing. That's fine.
Glencore, have you heard about Glencore yesterday? The shareholders said, we don't want you to mine coal anymore.
Okay.
So they basically decided...
They can see the writing on the wall.
Yeah.
And this is where we come back to the 3 tiers of action. I think at the personal level, I've got investments, I've got a superannuation fund, and I have elected to have what they call ethical investment. I think a lot of people can do this. There are all sorts of options now. You can opt out of certain types of investment, such as tobacco, if you don't believe in investing, or arms, or artillery, or killing machines, or drugs, or what. You can actually specify where you don't want your money to be. And if you don't want your money to be invested in fossil fuels, you can invest it in renewables. So I mean, this is something that we can all do. And that's a direct message. I mean, you may not have, tens of millions of dollars of investment individually, but if everybody did this, it would be a huge impact, because then that's the market now. The market would move in a direction that they are needed. And if there's more investment in renewables and less investment in fossil fuels, then we can go somewhere. This is the irony. This is one of the ironies of where we are today. A lot of good things are happening at if you like, as I said earlier, individual corporate level. And there are many reasons why that's happening. I think a lot of people are on board, they understand, they get it. And even for people like Google, I don't know what goes on in the boardroom of Google. I'm not privy to that. But my guess is it's the people who work in Google, you see. There are a progressive bunch of people. I suspect they're not my age, I can assure you of that. They're half my age. They're the new generation of people who are looking beyond the next year, beyond the next 2 years, beyond the next 3 years. Well, that's one of the problems we have today in the world, in the economic model that runs the world, and that is short-termism. We know that many companies in China, for instance, in Japan and many other, they look at the next 20 years, not the next year. But even our politics is run on a 3-year term, 4-year term. And politicians, when I mention how difficult it is politically, if politicians didn't have this short-term view of the world, of their constituency, of their voting public, then I think we would have different outcomes and different decisions by politicians and by governments. So that's a problem, but I don't know how we can overcome the short-termism, because even in a number of corporations, and I've worked with a lot of these, short-termism is alive and well because they're looking at the next financial year. That's it. Next financial year. But it depends on the sector. The energy sector does look at beyond, because their investments, when you're looking at fossil fuel and coal and mining and energy supply, etc., you're looking at where, because once you invest your $10 billion in your next, that $10 billion isn't just the next year. It's look at when they calculate the rate of return on that investment, it's a 20, 30, 40-year rate of return. So that's why for a lot of these energy companies, it's the long term. This is going to sound horrible, but once the people, the older people in power, basically die off. I hate to say this, but once they die off and the next generation comes in, I mean, you look at Macron, for instance, the new generation of leaders, they're already talking a completely different language. When I listen to, and I know Macron probably has his enemies, but I'm not talking politics here. But when I listen to Macron, honestly, I hear completely completely different language from him. I'm just giving, and even Angela Merkel, when she speaks, I hear of course it's German, but when I hear that, I hear the translation. It's to me, it sounds like a different language. Well, I don't mean language as in linguistics, but language as in the content, the expression, the emotion, the message, the sentiment are different. Whereas if I hear other leaders of the world talk, I just go, oh my God, it's, I think I'm in a parallel world, where there's two worlds going on, and one's going that way and one's going this way. I'm trying to cut the long ones, the tall ones. But look, the real area here is the people who are making decisions for us, the politicians, the prime ministers, the presidents of this world, the people who are coming to the United Nations. They're the people. So how do we influence them? I think public opinion in the world, money is going to talk, and very, very loudly. We know that. And politics is difficult for these people because of all the things we talked about. Short-termism, the economy, social issues. For instance, people talk about jobs because it's important for economic growth, for people to have a job so they can feed their family, so they can prosper, etc. But the problem is, again, I don't think the scientists, and I take some responsibility here, we haven't done enough to provide data and studies that show actually that the new economy, the greener economy, is going to provide even more jobs than the previous one. When computers first came into our lives, people said, oh my God, all these people are going to lose their jobs. Computers are going to take over our lives. Well, in fact, they have taken over our lives. But look at the jobs it has created. The IT industry, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but the IT industry, not just the computers, but the entire IT industry, the internet industry, the IT, the computers, the gadgets we have today, everything is linked to the universe through IT.
Yep.
That has created 1,000,000 times more jobs than the jobs that were lost because of the introduction of computers. Think of it that way.
Yep.
Okay, so the way I look at it, I'm an engineer basically, the way I look at it is the new energy provision, as I said, energy is fundamental to our economy. So whether we provide it using fossil fuels or whether we provide it using turbines or solar energy or whatever, it's still going to be the same amount of effort and jobs and technology and intellectual property. Look at all the different, for instance, the development of more efficient solar panels. When I was first in this business, solar panels were about a quarter of the efficiency of they have today. So the technological development, that means scientists, engineers, economists, people, manufacturing, all of these things have created, and my point is, they will continue to create a completely new economy and just as many jobs, just as many opportunities for startups, for major companies, for these fossil fuel companies to invest instead of trillions in drilling holes in the middle of the ocean, and of course all the risks of doing that. By the way, drilling, just incidentally, drilling holes in the ocean has enormous risks. We've seen some of it. We've had explosion of drilling rigs, but also in leakages. There was a major leakage in the Gulf of Mexico. It's not so many years ago. So the ecology, whereas there's not a lot of risk really in putting solar panels and even wind turbines, although some people think wind turbines cause headaches and all sorts of things, but many studies have shown. I mean, so the environment, but because the way I look at all this is not just, as you said at the very beginning, the ecological, because fossil fuels don't just emit, when we burn fossil fuels, it's not just emitting carbon dioxide, it's actually emitting a lot of other pollutants into the air. When we drive our cars, it's not just carbon dioxide that's going into the atmosphere, a lot of particulates, a lot of carbon monoxide, sulfur compounds, etc., going into the atmosphere. And that's, I mean, you ask someone who lives in Beijing, you ask someone who lives in Shanghai, and talk about pollution, air pollution there. I'm not talking about I'm not talking about climate change, I'm talking about air pollution. So there's no air pollution in solar panels, there's no air pollution in wind turbines. I mean, people ask me about batteries and how the manufacturing process, the fact that, when you're making these...
It's minimal compared to...
But it is, you're absolutely right, Albert. It is, but compared to, and over the lifetime of wind turbines, over the lifetime, even for, say, a battery car, a electric car, people say to me, well, what about the chemicals and the energy that goes into making of the battery? Many studies, this is not me saying this, many studies have been done on this. And particularly if you charge your car battery using solar energy, for instance, the overall long-term impact of that is much, much less than the impact of a normal petrol-driven car over its lifetime. So there you go. So that's what greenhouse gases do. And now we need to talk about what impact greenhouse gases have on the climate and what the climate change actually means to our lives.
People in Parliament, members of Parliament, they'll be the ones who will be, remembered for not doing anything. Don't they realize that, and don't they want to change that and actually be remembered for actually being the saviors? I mean, it's just like...
Here is my cynical side now. Here is my cynical side, Albert. for those people, they'll say, well, I'll be dead and gone. I'm going to enjoy my life as much as I can. I really don't care what history will see me. Look, who remembers, other than the big names of history, who remembers the parliamentarians in the, I don't know, in the 1900s? Who remembers them? I mean, you know what I mean? It's a matter. It becomes a philosophical question as to what are we doing here? What am I doing in this life? And is it important for me to leave something better behind? I've enjoyed a wonderful life, and I would like to think, well, I've got 2 sons, and I would like to think that I'm leaving something for my sons and their children, something as wonderful, as enjoyable, and as beautiful as the life that I have been able to enjoy. And that's my raison d'être, but other people have different priorities.
Yeah. Now you mentioned your sons. Of course, I'm thinking of my 4-year-old son, and I'm getting emotional.
You are. Yeah, it is. It is that. But you know what? You are doing what you can, and I'm doing what I can.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it is. I guess we all do. Back to the individual level, I think I think we can all do more. I really do, at the individual level. You know, I'm doing. I mean, this is part of what I'm doing. This is part of what I'm doing, and I don't know what else I can do other than the actions that I can control.
Yeah.
But I think voting. I think, as I was saying to you earlier, we must not vote politicians. I'm sorry to say this, and I know there are other issues to consider. There's economics, social issues, health, education. Yeah, I get it, of course. These things are also important, because education of children, health of children, yes, all these things really matter in our lives. But on balance, I would strongly suggest people to think very carefully about politicians who are going to make decisions for us, for me, for you, that have huge consequences for future generations of this country and of the health and of the world. Think carefully about this. I would be it would be very difficult for me to separate climate change politics from health, education, and social politics. I'll tell you why. Because, as we said, as we have said in this conversation, because managing climate also has social impacts. It's affecting the people who were affected by the floods, by the fires in California. That had a major social impact, major economic impact. These people don't have a home anymore. Okay, so these are important things. So to separate climate as a separate little environmental issue is, I think, misguided, because this affects a lot of many aspects of our lives, and I think politicians need to be put under pressure to act on this. And it's not a choice anymore, as we said. It is no longer a choice. Studies have shown that our earliest experiences of a particular issue can really colour the way we see things, the way we believe things. Let's say in my very earliest experience of driving, there was a man, an elderly man, who wore a hat, who cut across me, and in fact I almost had an accident, and I thought, what the hell is this man doing? Let's say, this is just a hypothetical scenario. This hasn't happened to me, but let's. So what happens apparently is that goes into my brain, from that moment onwards, this is confirmation bias, every time something happens on the road, I will look to see, oh, is he wearing a hat, or is he an older man? And you know what? Every time it is a person with a hat, it might only be 1 out of 100, but that 1 in 100 is going to go, see? I knew it. I knew it. Elderly men with hats on are bad drivers. Sorry, I apologize for elderly men who wear hats that are watching this, but you know what I mean. I'm just giving a very silly hypothetical example. Okay, so when it comes to climate change, again, this has been done in many studies. It turns out this is why, although we have these severe storms and floods and all of that, it turns out for people who don't believe in it, they are looking for other evidence. They're not looking for the flood that happened last week. They will say, but what about the 2-year drought we had back in 1989? What about that? See, that's gone into their head, and it's hardwired. It's hardwired in there. So the flood goes, it gets washed away, but the drought, the 2-year drought back in such and such year, it's there. Again, it's confirmation bias. The other very common one I have is, yeah, look, it's really hot today, but you know what? Last year we had a number of hot days as well. So Arek, what are you talking about? I don't think you're not presenting me with compelling evidence. It turns out the compelling evidence is there. They just can't see it. So what we do is, when we want confirmation of our own belief system, we look for that. We are looking for that. And it's a bit like looking through a newspaper. Not many people do this anymore. Okay, they do this now. What we're doing is, it turns out, we don't read the bits that are challenging our belief system. We will read the headline, severe climate, next page, you see? So that unfortunately is a real barrier to these people who still. I went to have dinner with one of my school friends I hadn't seen for 40 years. It's a he, my age, yep, we went to school, same class. He is now a medical specialist, highly scientifically educated. He doesn't believe in climate change. It makes no sense to me. Unbelievable. Again, he mentioned these confirmation bias, I won't go into it, it's too boring, where he said, oh, what about this, and what about that, and what about this, and how about that, and we've had this, and we've had So all I can do is take a deep breath and enjoy my dinner. What if I said to you, 1 in every 100 tomatoes will kill you? Kill you, not make you sick, it will kill you. So I guess I'm talking about a catastrophic possibility. Would you eat your next tomato? And that's again, you see, okay, what if? All right, let me. This is a good rhetorical question. Yeah. What if it's 1 in 100? What if it's 1 in 500 tomatoes? Would you eat it then? Would you eat another tomato? But just remember, just one tomato, one bite, and you're gone, right? Okay, but now the statistics have changed. It's one in 500 tomatoes is known to kill people. Again, so it's that kind of a rhetorical, it's that kind of a very, very philosophical question. And that's where climate change is at the moment, I think. We are not in that point in history when we are thinking this is so important, we have to drop everything. You know, we have to accept the consequences, the economic, social consequences of this catastrophic possibility. Albert, I will say one thing with almost 100% certainty.
Yeah.
I will say this with absolute, and it'll happen well after I'm dead and gone. Mm-hmm. I think, I predict, and I hope this film will be watched at that time, I think future generations will not forgive us. I truly, truly believe that. Future generations are going to look at this period of history, you know, the early 2000s, and they're going to say, what the hell were they thinking about? Why did they completely ignore the science? Why did they completely ignore the projections and in fact what was already happening in the 2018, 2019? Why did they completely just were blind, completely blind to that?